So we are officially in the heat of December. Today is December 5th. And I know there's a lot of talk about FBM, and obviously we all want to crush December, right? But what should not be forgotten in these next couple weeks is really establishing a game plan for 2024, right? Because what we don't want to happen is obviously everyone's on a high of November, December, and even into January for, gift card season and stuff like that. But what we don't want to happen is realize that when we're now in mid-February, we haven't really established a game plan in terms of how to approach February, March, April, and now 2024 is halfway through, and we haven't really taken advantage of the days and months that we are currently seeing, right? So we want to be proactive with really establishing a game plan with next year, with 2024, to be able to set goals, right, and ultimately hit them and achieve them and overcome them, right? And so part of all this game planning on Amazon is really establishing, and obviously, how much you want to make, right? Because that's really where the conversation starts, right? Because once you establish that number, then we can evaluate and solve for a ton of different things from that, right? How much we need to be spending, the quality of stuff that we need to be looking for, how we're going to be sourcing, and how the product's really going to fit into that equation, right? But all of that starts with the most obvious factor, the output of the business. The reason why we're all in this business is to make money, right? So I'm going to kind of walk you through how we can approach this conversation and how you guys can do the same sort of thing, the same sort of exercise as we prepare for 2024, right? And so as promised, let's start with just a profit number, right? How much on a yearly basis do I want to make, right, in 2024? And so just for some clean math, for argument's sake, right, let's put that number at $100,000, right? So I want to make next year $100,000 take-home profit, right? We're not going to necessarily get into the nitty-gritty of taxes and stuff, right, because I'm not qualified to talk about that stuff. But let's say after all expenses and stuff like that, we're going to make $100,000, right? That's our goal. Now, that's great, but the problem that a lot of newer sellers run into is inevitably, okay, the 100,000 is great, right? I want to make all this money, but how do I get there? What are the tangible steps in order to achieve that, right? And so that next part is after we've kind of established, how much we want to be making, right? And it's easier said than done, of course. The next step is, okay, given this profit, what sorts of products should I be looking for, right? And keep in mind the end result is spend, right? How much we need to be spending on a monthly basis in order to get to this overarching annual profit number, right? And so we're kind of reverse engineering, reverse calculating how we can work back to this spend number, right? And the next step from profit is, okay, given all the money I want to make, right? Well, I need to have some criteria in terms of the sorts of products that I'm looking for, right? And so, again, just for some round numbers, let's set that at 15%, right? 15% margin is going to be the criteria that I set for my business, right? I'm going to be committed to 15% margin on generally all sorts of products that I'm looking for, right, as an overarching average. Now, I could say yes to some 12 or 13% margin, some 10% margin. Maybe the stability is really good, right? Maybe I can acquire them pretty quickly from a wholesaler. And I could also say yes to some 20 and 25% margins. Maybe they're heavy hitters, right? Maybe they're seasonal items, something like that. But overall, I should be keeping in mind that, again, for this argument, I'm going to be really committed to that 15% margin, right? And so this is going to help as we go along in 2024. We can track to that number, right? So say we start January, February, March, maybe our margin's at, 12 or 13%. Well, now we know to critique our averages. We know to critique our sourcing because we've already kind of laid the blueprints of how we're going to make the money that we want to make, right? And so this is all great, right? We have our margin that we're shooting for, 15%, right? What can we do with profit and margin, right? If we just simply divide them, right, that gives us our sales, or our target sales of, our target sales that are going to really generate the profit that we want, given a specific margin, right? And so all we're simply going to do here is take our profit and divide by our margin, right? And so what we've solved for here is we're saying, right, if I want to make $100,000 in this business, right, and I'm committed to 15% margin across as a big average across all my products, well, that means I need to sell about $667,000 over the course of the year, right? I can drill that down to monthly, what that equates to, right? If I divide this simply by 12. If I really want to get fancy, maybe I want to kind of skew it based on particular months, right? Maybe I know December and November are going to be heavier, so I can plan out my calendar year accordingly based on all these factors, right? And so now that we have the sales that we need, but that ultimately doesn't really help, right? Sales are great, but if there's one thing about Amazon is we can't ultimately control how much we're selling, right? The consumer controls that. The types of products that we are buying and selling control that, right? So we're not necessarily going to track and focus on sales too much, right? Because it's an intangible output, right? We don't necessarily control if we sell 3,000 or 2,000 on any particular day, right? But over the long term, if we're buying the right products, if we're spending the money we should, well, the sales will happen, right? Given our margins where it should be, now the profit will happen, right? And so we're getting closer to our spend goal, but there's one missing piece, and that's going to kind of be a buy cost percentage metric. And not to get too in the weeds of what this is actually doing, all the buy cost percentage is calculating is it's calculating for a relationship between how much we're selling and how much we're spending, right? Those are the kind of that is what needs to be linked, right? And so, for example, if and this is all information our business is telling us, right? If you go into Seller Board or Inventory Lab, you can calculate this for yourself, right? Just take you tally up your buy costs for the past couple of months, tally up all your sales, and really calculate that out, right? But what you'll see, and generally that's going to be like, and so if we kind of map it out by the buy cost percentage and the margin will kind of go inversely, right? And so if we kind of map it out just so you guys can see, right, if we say a 15% margin, right, well, that's probably going to correlate to somewhere, I switched it, right? That's probably going to correlate to somewhere between like maybe like a 50%, right, buy cost percentage. That's saying if I buy something over 100, I'm selling it for about 200, right? And that's generally kind of what we're shooting for. Now, as our margin increases and decreases, well, our buy cost is going to react to that. Say we want to get more stricter in our sourcing and we want to increase our business margin to 20%. Well, it stands to reason then our buy cost percentage is going to drop, right? Don't take these numbers exactly, right? It may be 0.37, it may be 0.42, something like that, but it's probably going to be around 0.4, right? Now, if we lower our margin to maybe 12%, well, our buy cost percentage is going to get more skewed, right? Maybe it's going to be like 0.55 or 0.6 or somewhere in that range, right? But for this example, again, being that we're at a 15% margin, it's probably going to be somewhere, again, around that 50% ratio, right? And again, do this calculation for your own business. Take the past 2 or 3 months, tally up all your buy costs, tally up all your sales, and kind of see where you fit with this buy cost percentage. But what this does for us is it allows us now to solve for our spend, right? It allows us, because this buy cost relationship, again, is the relationship between sales and spend, well, now we can multiply that buy cost percentage against our ratio that our business has told us, right, given the past, trailing 3 or 4 months, and now we've solved for our spend, right? This is the tangible action item that we can now take and apply to our business, right? Because now if we take this and drill it down to the monthly scope, well, now I just solve for how much I need to be spending on the monthly basis, right? Because this is all interconnected, right? If I want to make $100,000 next year, right, and I'm committed to, I really think I can solve or source products consistently at a 15% margin, well, that stands to reason I'm going to have to sell, about $670,000 worth of products. So over the long term, obviously your monthly sales are going to go up and down, but over the long term, this is kind of how it's going to unfold. And again, keeping your buy cost percentage honest with your margin, we can now solve for how much we need to be spending, one, over the course of the year, but also, and more importantly, over the course of a month, because this is what's going to be our tracker, right? As we are progressing through a month, we could even solve for, of course, how much we need to be spending on a weekly basis, although I wouldn't go any kind of more micro than that because we don't want to be pushing spend, right? We don't want to be tracking, I have to spend $700 every single day. We don't want to be forcing that spend to happen on a daily basis. But on a weekly basis, that's going to kind of be a good audit in terms of your activity, right? If you go 2 straight weeks in a particular month, maybe in January as you're starting the calendar year, and you've only spent $5,000 over the course of 2 weeks, well, then we have to change some things, right? We have to maybe start to source different ways, different sites, different sorts of products. We know to change because ultimately our goal is $100,000, right? All this is interconnected. And now it's also related and it can be changed, right? So as I'm going through the year, right, maybe I'm having a hard time meeting the 15% margin, right? So maybe I want to kind of drop my criteria to maybe 12%, right? Well, things are changing, right? Obviously, our buy cost percentage will react to that 12%. So it'll probably be around, again, that, 0.5, 0.6-ish area, whatever that means, right? But ultimately, our spend is shifting, right? So to get the same profit amount, again, I've lowered my margin, opening up probably more product opportunities, easier to source. Of course, I have to sell more. But what that ultimately means, we don't care about the sales. We care about these numbers right here. Well, I have to spend more on a monthly basis to make all these things happen, right? And that's how this conversation kind of unfolds. Again, it starts with, this is step one, starting with your profit. Then your commitment to your business, right? The sort of products that you want to be sourcing, right? This is kind of like 2A, right? It doesn't necessarily dictate anything. It's just a number, right? Sales don't mean profit. So we can call that 2A, and we can call this 2B, right? But ultimately, this is really where we want to get to, right? This spend is going to be our driver. That's going to be our telltale sign of our activity and kind of keeps us honest in terms of what we're doing compared to what we need to be, which is, of course, the profit number that we're geared towards. And so then the follow-up question is, okay, I want to make 100. I've solved for all this stuff. It all looks great. Now it's okay. Well, do I have this capability to spend $42,000, $50,000, call it, over the course of the month, each and every month? If I do, great. This is all very realistic. If I do not, well, then some things need to change, right? So maybe I only have $25K and maybe cash that I want, and I'm only comfortable using that, whatever the case may be, right? Well, then I have to get this number down closer to where I'm comfortable spending each and every month. There's a couple ways to do that, of course. Either sacrifice my output, the profit, or make our margin more strict, right? So maybe because I'm restricted on capital, right, I have to make my margin more strict, right? I have to source harder to find better products. Obviously, again, this buy cost is going to react, right? So maybe it's going to be like 0.4. But you see what happened, right? As our criteria shifts or our spend decreases, right? Again, keeping the profit steady, all these things react to that. And so this is kind of sort of, again, cumulatively the evaluation, the conversation that you need to have with yourself, your business, to really kind of put the blueprint forward to lay the path to success for 2024. And it all starts with, of course, how much you want to make, the sorts of products that you're committed to, and finally, your spending capability, right? Because if this doesn't align with what you're actually capable of spending, then we have to make some changes in terms of how this whole conversation follows. So that's it for today's video, guys. If you did enjoy it, leave a comment in the show notes, and we will see you in the next one.